Hi again, everybody. This is the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. Opening day is here. We'll get you ready for tonight's opening game and really preview the whole season ahead, make some Cubs predictions, and catch you up with other news from around Major League Baseball. Cubs open up the 2024 season tonight in Texas, 7:30 Eastern on Marquee and ESPN. Justin Steele, the start for the Cubs. Nathan Eovaldi for the Rangers. Cubs took 2 of 3 against the team last year, and they've won 5 of their last 6 season openers. So there's reason to be confident here tonight against the defending World Series champions. Not a lot of roster changes for the Cubs during the offseason. If you followed the team in 2023, you'll see a lot of familiar faces. I think this year's team will do better than last year. More predictions coming up. Biggest change for the Cubs is the addition of manager Craig Counsell, and I think that is such a wonderful thing. Far better manager than David Ross, and I think he'll have more talent with the Cubs than he had in Milwaukee, where he did pretty well for a number of years. Cody Bellinger is back with the Cubs. Marcus Stroman is gone. Shota Imanaga is an overseas signing, new to the Cubs, new to the starting rotation. And Hector Neris is a pretty nice addition to the bullpen. Christopher Morel is going to get a chance at everyday play at third base. First base, we will see. It could end up being first base by committee, but the Cubs are very high on Michael Busch, a top prospect from the Dodgers. He was kind of out of options with the Dodgers, so we'll see if getting some consistent time will pay off for him. Outfield from left to right for the Cubs. On most days, you'll see Ian Happ, Cody Bellinger, and Seiya Suzuki. Mike Tauchman, the team's 4th outfielder. As mentioned, Christopher Morel getting a shot to play regularly at third. You've got Swanson and Horner up the middle, and Michael Busch gets the call most days at first base. Miles Mastrobuoni, Nick Madrigal, Patrick Wisdom are all still around as bench options or designated hitter options. Wisdom, though, starts the season on the injured list with a back issue. Happ and Madrigal were also impacted by injuries in the spring. It's worth noting that, but they're both good to go for the season, including tonight's opening game. Cubs pitching, Justin Steele is the opening day starter. Jameson Taillon expected to be number 2 of the rotation, but he is starting the season on the injured list, expected in mid-April, hopefully to return. Shota Imanaga is new to the majors after a successful career overseas. Kyle Hendricks is back. Jordan Wicks and Javier Assad will also begin the season in the starting rotation. Craig Counsell says he'll rely on a 6-man rotation at times, wants to avoid overworking the arms, hopefully be able to help stretch them into a run into October. I think the Cubs are blessed to have so many options to slot into the rotation. I do think there is some limited upside to having several guys who can slot into the rotation, but no higher than as a back-end guy, as a number 4 or number 5 starter. You really need to, be strong up front, and I think that the Cubs will eventually add someone to the rotation. But again, more predictions to come. The bullpen with some familiar names, including Drew Smyly, Julian Merriweather, Mark Leiter Jr., Jose Cuas. They're all back. So is Adbert Alzolay. Hector Neris is a nice addition. I think we'll see Yency Almonte establish himself in his first year with the Cubs. Other names that come to mind, Matt Mervis, Hayden Wesneski, Pete Crow Armstrong, Alexander Canario. They're all still with the Cubs organization, but they're starting the year in Iowa. Craig Counsell says Wesneski should continue to grow through consistent action, and that was not going to happen in Chicago. So that's why he will be in Iowa. Matt Mervis, a lot of folks high on him. If you follow the chatter online the last couple of years, you'd think he'd already be the Cubs starting first baseman, but that is not the case. He will start the year in AAA, and we'll see if he has much of a future with the Cubs. I do kind of wonder about this. If Michael Busch establishes himself as a solid first baseman, maybe the most solid first baseman for the Cubs since Anthony Rizzo, then is there a place for Matt Mervis? We shall see. PCA and Canario, both great outfield options at some point. They're interesting to watch. I've been high on PCA since they traded for him, but Canario was the one who really had the stronger spring. We'll see if either get to impact the Cubs' major league lineup at some point this season. So that's an overview of the roster to begin the year. Things happen, plans change, rosters change. I think this team adds a solid number 2 or 3 starter before the trade deadline, so sometime in July. I think that'll be the biggest hole to fill. This team has a lot of prospects, some of whom are going to be blocked from ever getting regular, consistent play at the major league level. So I think the Cubs have prospects to possibly ship out in July to bring back another starter or whatever other hole needs to be filled as the Cubs power up for a postseason push. I said 82 wins was reasonable last year, and the Cubs finished with 83. This year, I'm saying 88. That makes a record of 88-74. Cubs make the postseason and go to the National League Championship Series. Bellinger has a great year again, but that means he's going to opt out for a longer-term deal elsewhere during the off season. Suzuki will be great too. That's not a shock. He finished last year strong, and he looked really good this spring. Michael Busch and Yency Almonte both came to the Cubs in a trade with the Dodgers this offseason, and I think they're both going to contribute in big ways. The Cubs will be declared the easy early winner in that trade. Justin Steele repeats as one of the best arms in the National League. More on the Cubs in just a moment. This and that, our news and notes segment from around Major League Baseball. The opening day schedule today includes all 30 teams, 15 games, although 2 are already postponed by weather. 2 games are already in the books. Dodgers and Padres split a pair of games in Korea last week, the Seoul Series. Also included several exhibition games, too, a nice showcase for Major League Baseball. Cubs and Dodgers reportedly lined up for next year's opening games in Tokyo. That report has the Cubs going from spring training in Arizona, packing up, going to Tokyo, then back to America for a West Coast road trip before continuing on to Chicago for their home opener. So they might be the last team to have a home opener in 2025, if that report is right. Scott Boras' clients were the highly touted free agents heading into the offseason, and they all ended up with contracts that no one saw coming, meaning they were shorter and for far less money than expected. But that's good for the Cubs because they were able to keep Cody Bellinger, 3-year deal, $85 million deal, but there are player opt-outs for the off seasons following the 24 and 25 seasons. Blake Snell and Matt Chapman both signed with the Giants, and Jordan Montgomery didn't sign till this week with the Diamondbacks, all with short contracts and far less money than expected. I've said it the last couple off seasons, and I'll probably say it still in the future too. The era of owners doling out crazy contracts is over. Yes, there is still plenty of big contracts being handed out, but teams are not taking the same approach to the big dollar deals as they took a few years ago. On to the National League Central and the Cubs' place in it. There's not a lot of power. There's not a definitive team that's looking like they're going to take the division. Most experts predict St. Louis with a record slightly above 500 and the Cubs a game or 2 behind them. I felt earlier in the spring that the Reds were going to be the Cubs' biggest challenge to taking the division. Reds are dealing with a ton of injuries. It's a young team, so it's really tough to predict, but I do think the Reds are going to be a fun team to watch, regardless of how many games they win. Cards will be improved, but still mid-pack. I think the Cubs will end up as the division winner. I wouldn't have said that 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I'm calling it now. I think they will be neck and neck with someone up until July. Trade deadline comes. Cubs make some moves and finish the year in a nice upswing. This year's version of last year's Diamondbacks. Cubs, Reds, Cards, 1, 2, 3 in the division. 88-74 for the Cubs. They lose in the National League Championship Series. Cody Bellinger will leave in the offseason, but the Cubs make a couple signings. Keep in mind, Cubs have a lot of contracts running through 2026, so the team, the front office, will go all in for a big push in 25 and 26. Think of this year's team as the 2015 Cubs. It's a good team on the rise. That 15 team ended up with 97 wins. We'll see how it goes this year. Tonight, the season opener, Cubs and Rangers, 7:30 Eastern. Steele and Eovaldi, the starting pitching matchup. Lineup's not yet set, but Craig Counsell has said Ian Happ will be leading off, and he wants his 3 best hitters at the top. So expect Happ, Suzuki, Bellinger to go 1, 2, 3 in the lineup most days. Be sure to follow us so you never miss an episode. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. It is the Bricks and Bleachers Podcast.